This is the E-Commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Ben Hussey from Katana Cloud Inventory to the pod. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me here.
My pleasure to have you along with me for the ride today. You've been with Katana for a couple of years, and now you are currently the co-CEO of the business. You're based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. That certainly does not sound like a Toronto accent to me. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into this industry? As I look back across your history, man, you got a serious commerce pedigree before you. Elastic Path, VTEX, Fluent Commerce, Meropost. Look, you've been deep in this commerce space for a while now. Why don't you tell us how you got into this whole thing called commerce?
Yeah, it feels like many years. As often in the tech space, 1 year kind of feels like 4. Yeah, I came over from the UK back in 2003, did some studying, life happened, I stuck around.
Did you meet a girl?
Yeah, that did come into it.
Okay, funny, that's often a story that I hear.
Yeah, pretty common reason. Yeah, that encouraged me to stick around in Canada, and at that time I got a really good job in Toronto with Rogers Communications, big telco up here. And it was one of my first big jobs, but I think a little bit by accident, I actually ended up in the web commerce space there. And it was with the retail team, but we were using web technology to automate. Right? So basically, to take any transaction that would normally go to the call center, we would be diverting it onto the web. So instead of the store picking up the phone, calling the call center for help, they could do it on the computer in store. And it seems ancient and obvious now, but back in those days, that was what we were working on. And we would be diverting a couple of 100,000 calls a day in its peak in terms of volume. So it was a big enterprise. We had this peak, I think probably had 100 people on the team. We were running all kinds of commerce platforms. We ended up doing the rebuild of Rovers.com and Fido and some other properties. And going throughout, I spent pretty much 6 years building and getting experience on the client side. I got trained as an Agile Scrum product owner and Scrum teams. We went through the whole kind of Agile transition. Also ran some dev teams and things. So I just got this great broad experience. And as part of that, we actually bought A2G software.
Wow.
And one of the guys that works there one day called me up and said, hey, I think you'd be good at sales. And I joined Hybris. So Hybris had just come into North America from Germany. And I was in salesperson number 4 or 8 or something. One of the first year. Went into mid-market software sales and into enterprise and sold all across North America, loads of different businesses for a couple of years. We got bought by SAP. That was obviously a journey and some great experience. Ultimately, after a year of being there, it was up to me. And coincidentally, the equity firm that had bought and sold Hybris with SAP, they actually took myself and a few others to one of their other companies, my work person. And so we were running a commerce and ad business for grocery. Actually worldwide, but mostly North America. I was there for a bit, and then, like you said, Elastic Path, and then helped them with some scaling VTEX when they came into North America. And then, 2 years ago, I joined Katana as a CRO because I moved up into revenue leadership, but always in commerce. And then, Fluent Commerce is more of an OMS, water management system.
Yep.
And then kind of we're ERP for a small, medium-sized business. So we can do that end-to-end from buying all the way through to
Wow. What a journey. You've definitely been vendor side for a long time now, so you know how the machinations of vendor side operations work and RevOps, etc. But when you first came along to Katana, you weren't a founder of Katana, right? You purely were brought in as an external member of the C-suite to help build the business, correct?
That's right. It was actually founded in Estonia. So Estonia is actually a really big tech hub in Europe.
Of course.
Bolt, Wise, a bunch of huge companies
Of course.
come out there. They were looking for a North American revenue leader. 60% of our business is here. And so they wanted someone here with a C-suite title. And then, after about probably 12 months as the business was growing and evolving, the founders they're selling the business. Co-CEO is one of the other founders, but he's been focusing on some of our fundraising and some other things we've got going on, some of our long-term strategy, how we really exponentially grow. We'd actually, one of our other founders is our CTO, and everyone's still in the business, but the kind of day-to-day running is myself and then our Chief Operating Officer, Rika. He's based in Finland.
Wow. Amazing. And when we look out across the landscape of the commerce tech stack, and you'll know this for having been in the industry for a very long time, IMS is not it definitely doesn't get the airtime, and it definitely doesn't get the place in the stack, perhaps, that the more sexy components do, like commerce, like OMS, like WMS, like PIM, like CDP. Those other components of the commerce stack, even search, merchant personalization, gets more airtime, obviously, than IMS does. And why do you think that is? I have my own theory, but I'd love to hear your theory first of
Yeah.
why IMS is, it just doesn't, many people don't necessarily understand where and when an IMS makes sense for them in their commerce business.
Yeah, so it's actually a really good question. So I do have some thoughts. One of them, I think, is just the natural tendency for people to focus on things that are closer to revenue, right? If it's closer to revenue, so the glass, the website, then that's where I'm going to focus because that's where I can, in my mind, move the needle the most easy, most obvious, most quickly. And I think particularly over the last decade, and I've obviously seen this in my journey, with the newness of e-commerce, this is obviously coming back a bit, but with that newness, with new technologies, there was always this large opportunity for change and large opportunity to move the needle at the glass. And therefore, you'll need to focus on the back end with low, because you can focus on the front end, which was sexy and cool and trendy, and you can move the needle quickly. You can make great business cases. If you're a customer side, you could get some promotions, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's one element. I think the other element is sometimes marketing would be driving the kind of the web side of things. And in that case, obviously they understand marketing technology and that side of things. Back end scary, don't want to touch that. And then that kind of leads me to the other thing, which is I think if you go back 5 to 10 years ago, technology's moved on a great deal, right? And 5 to 10 years ago, inventory management, ERP light, hard, scary, terrifying, in fact. You look at the net promoter scores for SAP and NetSuite, they're not great. In fact, they're negative. And when people are looking at the things they want to affect change on in a business and things they think are going to move the needle, that's not why they look. Personally, I think that's actually going to start to change. And I think there's some big driving factors that are really going to move that for people. And I think we're seeing some of that already this year.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think to your point, one of the, or a couple of the other reasons I think that have led to IMS being, if not ignored, then certainly moved down the totem pole of priorities within the back office of businesses, is that often IMS sits within a non-dedicated system. And by that, I mean that in most cases, an ERP will typically manage inventory if you're running an ERP. If you have a WMS, usually it owns inventory levels because you're doing all the receipting, you're doing all the shipping, you're doing everything else out of the WMS. And so therefore, you typically wouldn't need a standalone dedicated IMS if you've got a WMS. And oftentimes an OMS, if you've got a dedicated OMS like a Pipe 17, or you've got a dedicated OMS within your ERP, or you've got some sort of OMS platform within your business, or if OMS is part of commerce within your business and you're running a suite-based commerce system that has full end-to-end OMS capabilities, then you probably wouldn't necessarily have a need for a standalone dedicated IMS platform. However, I think when you're earlier in your commerce journey, before you've implemented an ERP, before you've implemented, when you're running a Xero or a QuickBooks in your back end for your accounting, when you're running commerce, and when you start to get more than one channel, like if you're an e-commerce pure play and you're running Shopify on the front end and you're running QuickBooks in the back end, and then everything else is a plug-in to Shopify, then you probably don't need an IMS because you're probably loading all of your inventory receipting directly into Shopify, and you're probably running some sort of a receipting app in Shopify. You probably have your warehouse manually managed, manually organized. It's probably by SKU set or by brand or by something like that. And even your pick, pack, dispatch is manually managed. And you may have a carrier aggregator system plugged into your commerce system to be able to manage the pick, pack, dispatch process. But there wouldn't be much of a place in the stack in that environment for an IMS. However, the moment you get more complex than that, the moment you become omni-channel enabled, the moment you start selling across TikTok Shop and across Amazon and across eBay and across all these other channels, social and otherwise, now all of a sudden you don't really have a place unless you add a custom attribute in something like Shopify, or you try to do something, you try to do some kind of hacky workaround. And obviously if you've got an omni-channel listing tool like a Rhythm or something like that, then maybe you try to manage inventory out of those type of platforms, which they're not really designed to do. And normally they take their inventory feed from somewhere else. So what I'm trying to say, I guess in a nutshell, is the moment you become omnichannel enabled and you don't have an ERP, you don't have an OMS, you don't have a WMS, you now all of a sudden are at a stage of maturity where you suddenly lose easy tracking and visibility of where all your inventory lives, particularly if you have more than one inventory location, particularly if you're working with 2 or 3 3PLs, plus you're working with FBA, plus you're working with, as your business grows in complexity, you need tooling that can support that level of complexity. And that's when our IMS, in my experience, starts to make sense within the technical backend stack.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think there's a couple other kind of triggers in there as well. So first off, absolutely true, right? And this is what we see a lot of. Companies grow, they get to a certain level of in size, in revenue or whatever, but ultimately it comes down to that complexity. As soon as I have more than one channel, Shopify is great for one channel. As soon as you move out of one channel, you're done. Won't work. And the other trigger we see is if it's a segment or an industry where there's a specific requirement. So food and beverage is a really good one because they have the tracking and tracing requirements for recall. We do that really well. So if you have a specific need like that, even if you're single channel, Shopify is the example, right? Won't cut it because it doesn't have that type of capability on how it manages inventory. It's just a pretty straightforward accounting. And so if you have a specific need like that, electronics is another one, actually, because of serial numbers, all their SKUs and everything have serial numbers on it. So they need a deeper level of tracking than just I have one thing. The other area we see and sometimes make to that is, like I said, if it's a pure reseller, right? If it's a pure play reseller, straightforward. Shopify, QuickBooks, you do. If you're making your own product, then you can't make it using Shopify. And so I often talk about above and below the line. So there's the above the line channel, which is traditional LMS space, right? In an enterprise world, we're talking LMS. And then there's the below the line, which in a small, medium-sized business, you're talking about MRP, right? Manufacturing. Because we kind of do both. You take someone who's a branded manufacturer, got a company that makes their own protein powders, right? They're using Katana, using it to make the purchase orders with their suppliers. They're then receiving the product. They're then using Katana to make the product, right? They're then putting in the time spent, the materials, raw materials they're using. They then know their finished good, which means they know cost of goods sold. That goes into QuickBooks with the integration. Inventory is available to Shopify. And so for those three systems, you can run a business up to a couple $100 million worth of revenue because all of that complexity, like you said, can be managed with those systems. And even you might have multiple warehouses. You might be making something in one warehouse and bringing in finished product from somewhere else and then combining them. That's where inventory management comes in, to your point.
Yeah, and I think also another scenario where inventory management starts to become important, even if you've got a relatively simple business otherwise, is when you have BOMs, right? When you have any form of complex product modeling, whether it's kits, whether it's bundles, whether it's BOMs, whether it's okay, cool. When this SKU gets ordered, then this is actually a synthetic SKU that is composed of 5 units of each of these 5 other SKUs. So we know when we ship, we actually need to ship these 25 items when this single SKU is ordered at this price on the front end. And so I think that anytime you have a complex product model and complex variant models, I go back to that kits and bundles thing, and particularly when you have products and services mixed together and okay, cool. Now, when someone orders this product, cool, I ship these physical products, but they get billed for this whole thing. And maybe it's a field services, maybe it's an installation, maybe it's a warranty, maybe it's whatever the case may be. And maybe you need to track availability of that resource inside of an inventory system. Even if it's a virtual product, you still need to be able to track how much of it you have available. And so I see some scenarios where you're not maybe large enough to justify an investment into a Fulfill or a NetSuite or a SAP or whatever it might be, but you are of sufficient complexity, whether it be channel mix, product mix, or both, that now all of a sudden, and also inventory location mix, that now all of a sudden it's probably one or all of those factors that would tip you over the edge where you go, okay, I can no longer manage this at scale in anything near real time in spreadsheets, which is how most people start. They start with spreadsheets, right? And then maybe they have a Google Sheet because, of course, Google Sheets has an API, and maybe they ask their 3PL to update a Google Sheet once per day on a cron with the inventory update, so that at least they've got some sort of single truth somewhere in their business. But unless you build some sort of custom dashboard layer over a Google Sheet, you really don't have any data visualization in a Google Sheet. And
But
this
it's
is
not
the
real time, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's the other problem with spreadsheets is, well, you've got dated information, and a spreadsheet doesn't think for you, right? It doesn't give you insights, doesn't give you answers. It's just a 1+1 kind of thing, sophisticated version, obviously. But this is the other reason, like, lots of people come out of Excel and come out to us is like the administrative burden for a smaller business owner to do everything in Excel. It's pretty significant to track all of that, right? They're spending a couple of hours a day. We had one customer views, they got up and running. They're like, we just figured out that we saved 30 hours a week in admin in Excel. It's like,
that pays for the platform, doesn't it?
return it, yeah, with $400 a month. In Toronto, that's a good dinner out for
Yeah.
a couple of people, the
Yeah,
bottom line.
yeah.
For $300 a month, even if you, like for some people, yeah, absolutely complexity, that makes it mandatory. But there are some people who are getting towards the edge of that town. They're going, actually, I spend so much time on this. It's worth it for me to make that shift.
And I guess then you can also typically, and again, in all transparency, I've never worked with Katana before, but typically in a good IMS, you're able then to say, okay, cool. We're going to create buffers in channels to say, okay, we don't want to oversell in a given channel. So we're going to say, okay, if the actual inventory number is 50, we're going to take 10% off that, dedicate that to a given channel because
like the dashboard, like traffic light system as well. So you've got your orders come in and it will create the bombs, and the bombs is going to have red, yellow, green. So as you said, you've got nested product where one of them is out of stock. Hey, if you don't go and get this in stock, then you've got a problem. It becomes your priority to go fix. That comes to the top of the list.
yes.
There's all things like very like intuitive. But again, like this is the other thing for me is 5-10 years ago, the modern tech didn't exist at a price point that could do all of those things. And that's the other thing I think that shifted for SMBs now have technology available to them at a price point. And even mid-market, even some enterprises now, there are some that use Shopify and things, and some that use us. And it's because the availability at a price point, and you get all this kind of capability for relatively small investment.
Yeah, and I think anytime your business requires calculated inventory, meaning that, okay, I've got a SKU that's composed of anything other than that single SKU, and anytime we have a synthetic SKU or a virtual SKU, depending on, people call it different things, but anytime you have a SKU that's not a single SKU, but it's actually composed of multiple SKUs or multiple units of multiple SKUs, now all of a sudden that synthetic SKU or that virtual SKU becomes a calculated inventory value. And so unless you're tracking all the sub SKUs related to that virtual SKU, you can't get an accurate inventory count of that virtual SKU. And so therefore, and the reality is that like the vast majority of commerce systems aren't designed to manage virtual SKUs. The vast majority of other back office systems, like your standard accounting system, is not designed to manage virtual SKUs. So you need some sort of a system that understands the relationship between SKUs and between products. And that relationship has to be built out somewhere. And even if you were trying to manage it via spreadsheet, you would have to have a crap load of macros in that spreadsheet to be able to do calculated inventory of sub SKUs. And that starts to become an unwieldy beast that is really hard to maintain.
And what you also, you're absolutely right, but what you also lack are things like costing. Like,
yeah,
how you effectively running your business if you don't know what inventory you've got and where you've got it, because obviously none of that affects your balance sheet, all that stuff. But if you think of the environment right now with tariffs and supply chain, right, and you've got all this inventory, you've got all these raw materials, the price of those might be changing on a, let's call it real time. It's certainly more often than a month in some cases, right?
Yes.
We've
Probably
seen
weekly.
unit costs go up 50% since the beginning of the year across all of our customers, right? And if you're trying to manage that and then you're trying to manage your margins to that, what should I be standing at? Should I be moving cost average? Like, how do I treat the financials? You want to do that in a spreadsheet. Makes things like crazy.
Yeah, totally. Because there's multiple models for how you manage that too. There's the FIFO model, there's the blended model, there's 100 different models you can use to manage that cost base when you're setting your average selling price on the front end, the retail selling price, or for that matter, the wholesale selling price. If you also have wholesale channels, which many of these manufacturers do, they're selling D2C and they're selling wholesale, and they have tiered pricing on the wholesale side of the business. So all of a sudden now we're starting to get into a scale of cost versus price management that is almost impossible to manage in a spreadsheet.
And I don't know what the count is, but if someone did the kind of combinations of math that has to occur, you can't do that manually, and you can't really set up Excel to get there. when you start putting all those things together.
It's a cascading set of variables that's really hard to manage.
Yeah.
And when the founders of this company started up Katana, it's a relatively young company. I think you guys have only been, how long have you guys been running? It's not that long, right? It's like less than a decade. It's eight years that you guys have been up and running.
Founded 8 years ago, went into operations a year in, basically. So we've been running for 7 years, and we've doubled in kind of size in the last 18 months, let's just say, give or take a bit.
Yep.
And so obviously we're now getting to more of that kind of growth curve. And yes, but we're relatively young, and I think that's given us some advantage in terms of the tech stack, right? We've come in at a time where we were able to build and continue to iterate the product on a flexible modern stack, right? Everything's on one product, really has a long architecture. But yeah, we're relatively new compared to some of the others in the market.
And when they started up Katana, obviously platforms like Unleashed, Sin7, Zoho Inventory, Fishbowl, take your pick. There were already some existing, and most of those have been around for between 15 and 20 years.
Absolutely.
And most people will have heard, if you've been in the industry at all, you've probably heard of Fishbowl, you've probably heard of Unleashed. And when they looked out across the landscape of major player IMSs out there, what was it that made the founders think, actually, they don't do these 5 things, say, for example, that we think the market needs and market wants and is telling us it wants. And so we're going to go out there and we're going to plug that gap very uniquely versus our competitors. And we think there's still enough of a blue ocean environment out there where we can win in the market. What told them that?
Obviously, the ERP space is massive. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the biggest TAM. It's 220 billion a year, I think. Morgan Stanley call it that. So it's ridiculous. And that's how. So in terms of kind of size of the market, sure, all of that was there. To your point, some incumbents. It actually looked at was the fact that no one out there liked any of those software systems. They existed and people used them, but no one liked to use them. And so their view, and this is one we've maintained, and it's actually I'm kind of personally really proud of, is it's about how we deliver the software and the capability, because part of the reason people don't change their ERP or IMS is because it's too hard. It's too difficult. The implementation's too long. It's too painful. It's too expensive. All of those things. So actually, the way we built out Katana and the way we continue to build it out is our mission is to build lovable software. That's what we talk about. And so for us, it's about making it as easy and intuitive as possible to get up and running. And a small business in particular, they don't have big IT teams. They don't have 6 months to get this up and running, right? Like, we want people just to be able to go on, load their products and get going. Now, obviously, very complex businesses might take a few weeks, but you should be able to do it yourself without an IT team, without all of these other things. And so that was the premise for us, is about making it as easy to buy and understand, as easy to get set up and running, and as easy to use as possible. And we're probably never going to have the same feature list as SAP, but nor do we really want to, because we believe that like 90% of those features probably aren't used by people, or any one person might not use 90% of them. And so we actually think that most customers and SMBs don't really care what technology is in reality, right? They're trying to solve a problem. They have a problem they have to solve, and they just want the easiest way possible to do that. And so for us, that's where we believe it's and also support is another one. We're big on support and making sure that customer can pick up a phone and call us and talk to someone in market that can help them. We have an onboarding team which will help people. But what we're really trying to do is just make it so that the technology and the capability is accessible to everyone as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And so that was really their premise, was definitely a problem. Manufacturers are struggling, right? I know when Christian kind of talks about it, he was working with a manufacturer and they had no idea what inventory they had. They had no idea what it cost them. They didn't know if they could fill their orders or not. They had no access to real-time information. They were flying blind and couldn't have told you if they were making money or not. And it's like, this isn't okay. Like, I want to help people. And so they founded the company really to try and help solve that fundamental problem.
Wow. It's interesting. That ease of use thing is something that drives a tremendous amount of what I call next gen sort of SaaS platforms. It feels like the Shopification, for lack of a better term, of the entire market, because admittedly, Shopify's their goal since day one has been to be a super easy to use platform. and to build an ecosystem of apps, et cetera, that are easy to use, that plug in seamlessly with the platform, and they just work. That's been their mantra, is to simplify commerce for everyone and make it more accessible as a result. And I was speaking at first of all, I had Mo from Pipe 17 on the podcast not that long ago, and then I spoke at their offsite in Mexico City recently. And in the discussions that I had with him, that was one of their reasons for being, was that, yes, there's massive heavy-duty OMSs in the market. There are OMSs that are part of all ERPs have an OMS. We have other standalone competitor OMSs in the market that are pretty well known, and certainly in the beginning were far more well known than Pipe 17. But their mantra was, how can we make enterprise grade OMS available to SMBs that have one person in the business that manages all this? And how can we make it so easy that it's literally as easy as dragging and dropping a workflow in our system as you would in a marketing automation platform for an email flow? How can we make it literally that easy to understand that you don't have to have a PhD in supply chain to be able to manage the order management of all the orders going out your door and managing order management for all these 15 channels that you run? And I feel like, and I've heard this same story or narrative from so many niche software vendors, and I would consider IMS a niche. It's a distinct niche, quite away from OMS and WMS. I've heard this same mantra from so many vendors over the last 2 years that it makes me think there's something in this. Just the simplification alone, there's something in that.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was looking at this probably a year ago, and I was looking at actually some data and some of the surveys that people like G2 and others have done. And you take the top 10 lists of things that are important to software buyers in the SMB mid-market space. What do you think features was? It was number
Like
8.
probably 5th or 6th down the list or something.
Number 8. Number 8.
Wow.
Number 1 is implementation needs. Number 2 is simplicity of the buying process. Number 3 is setup. Number 4 is usability. Number 5 is price. Like, none of it has got to do with the key. As long as it solves my problem, and obviously that's a table stake, right? It has to do the thing that the customer needs. But for the majority of people, we do that, and the majority of people, right? And in that scenario, what else matters to you?
Yeah.
And we actually firmly believe that it's not too long before the next big 100 million, 200 million a year revenue D2C brand is going to be running on an accounting platform that's your Shopify, and they'll be doing that for a few $1,000 a month.
Wow. I couldn't agree more. And I'm guessing in your world, like all of these sort of, I almost think of your platform as like a middleware platform in its own right. It has a lot of connections that are required to drive it, both in and outbound connections. So I'm guessing that system integrations for you guys is key to market growth. Like the technical partnerships you have, the out-of-the-box integrations that you have with your major accounting packages, with your major commerce platforms, with your major channels that people like to sell through, the Amazons of the world, the eBays of the world, the TikTok shops of the world. It would seem to me that system integrations that are plug and play and super easy to set up and fast to set up, that those would be a core part of your GTM messaging, and actually part of the technical capabilities of the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. We're part of the best of breed stack, right? We don't do accounting, right? Yeah. SAP in one suite, or even something like you do on the lower end of the market, right? They do all things for all people. And we don't do accounting, and we're not going to. We're not going to go build out accounting because A, it's really hard, and B, someone else has done it in there. There's a few people out there that kind of have the market. I'm not going to go out and compete with QuickBooks, and that makes a ton of sense. E-commerce, the same thing. Lots of people do it. They do it pretty well. No point us building out our own e-com, really. HR systems, again, not very much point us building that out. Shippers, tons of those. 3PLs, tons of those. And so what we look at is what's the core capability, and we're a system of record. So as a system of record, we hold the data, source of truth. And so for us, that puts us in a position, to your point, where what we want to do is enable people to integrate whatever they want. You have an open API, you can build your own thing if you want to. That's fine. Lots of people do. And so, yes, we have our own out-of-the-box integrations, and we focus on the ones that are complicated, like QuickBooks, actually, because of accounting and all the rules you have to have. Actually,
and compliance. Anything to do with compliance is scary.
Huge compliance. There's a ton of this stuff in there that's hard. You need a certain level of expertise. That's fine. But SPS Commerce for EDI, for example, we can't really do a lot with them. Real easy. They actually built the integration into this, right? They did it themselves. And so what we see is a feature where, yes, we're building integrations. We actually just deployed our new integrations marketplace earlier this year. We put it onto new technologies. What we're now doing is tuning it, but what we're actually tuning it for is we've got our AI development solutions. So soon our integrations are going to be built very quickly because it's going to be our AI development engine that's going to be churning those out. And then also will enable lots of other people to, whether it's a kid with a pizza in the basement building out an integration or an app, or big software, that kind of puts us at the, let's say, it's sort of kind of center of that. And then, like you say, integrations for whatever your business is, right? There'll be lots of different types of business models, some we don't know about today, I think, as well. And all of which would need some sorts of truths. But then they also need the flexibility to pick the right software or approach that works for their business. And I think that's the key.
Totally. And how do you guys make your money? Now, presumably being a SaaS platform, there's some element of some sort of subscription model associated with that, but I'm guessing it's got to be some kind of combination of total SKU count that you're managing, number of channels you're connecting to, both inbound and outbound, throughput of changes to those inventory values. And I'm guessing you've got receipting capability in the platform because obviously I've got to be able to scan inventory in if I'm running my own warehouse. So I'm guessing it's a combination of which modules of the platform do you need, or which capabilities of the platform do you need? How many people do you need accessing it? How many SKUs have you got? How many connectors do you need? I'm sure it's a combination of all of the above, but generally speaking, how do you price your platform in the market?
So it's what we, in the spirit of kind of our approach of branding, we want to keep it as simple as possible. You can do a month-to-month contract with us, no problem. You can do a quarterly, you can do an annual. You can pick whichever one you want. When it comes to the pricing model, there are different price plans, and basically, depending on your size of company, you'll pick a different plan. And with that, you'll also get different feature sets. The bigger the company, generally more features they need, and so you get more in that plan. But anyone could pick any size from a feature standpoint.
Yeah, I see that runs from like roughly $360 a month all the way up to sort of $1,800 a month for your highest level plan with kind of unlimited users, unlimited endpoints of integration, unlimited SKUs. If you want unlimited everything, you're probably going to be on the Professional Plus plan. But I'm guessing the bulk of your customers, do the bulk of your customers fall right in that fat middle of Professional at around that $800 a month mark?
Yeah, most are in the Professional, but actually we give you unlimited users and integrations in all of our price plans. We don't charge by integration. There is a kind of a location trigger for some of the plans.
Yep.
But we don't, because one of the things we found is that some users, it might be that someone chooses to share their user ID anyway.
Yeah.
But with that aside, what we found is actually we want people using the software. We want as many people in the company using it as possible because that's how we get the value from it.
Yes.
And for us to force someone to have to pay to have more people successfully using and getting value of the software didn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Which is why we're like, you know what, just use it. As many users as you want, that's great. Integrations, actually, that's core to our business. We're a best-of-breed stack, so have as many integrations as you want. Go have fun. We want to encourage that because we know that the more connections you have, the better customer you'll be for us, right? The longer you stick around. But also, again, the more value you're going to get from it, which is, again, what we're looking for. Because if you look at our customer base compared to the market average, our customers are growing at double the rate of the market average.
Wow.
And the more they grow, the more they need of the software and the more value they get from it. And of course, that also then moves people up through the price plans because generally they're happy, they like it, and they want to use more of it. So what we actually think is that if we enable the usage, enable the growth, like the value proposition behind Katana, then actually we'll do well from it in the long run. So that's the way we approached it versus an upfront, hey, an extra $50 for this or an extra $50 for that.
Makes complete sense. And if you were to look out over the next 6, 12, 18 months, obviously AI is getting a lot of airtime at the moment. If you don't have AI, you're probably not getting a lot of airtime in the market. But if you were to look out over that next 12 months, say, what is high on your radar in terms of any new features, functionality, capability? Is there anything you don't do today that your customers are asking for that you say, look, we don't do that today, but give us 6 months and we will be doing that thing? You know, where do you see the growth opportunity from a product perspective over the next year and a half?
It's a really good question, but I'd like to try and not answer it. Because actually, I'd like to answer it a bit differently. So what we are actually doing right now is, and also can't go into a ton of detail, but what we are doing right now is we believe we're going to be at the forefront of how we build products and the AI tooling. So we have AI capability in the platform. Yeah, it can give you some insights and recommendations. It can take sales orders and convert them into the bonds and things. So we have some of that stuff already, and we'll continue to do more of that. But actually, what we're looking to do is be able to 5x or 10x our product development output in a pretty short time period. And so for us, yes, we've got some features and functions coming out, and we've got some additional multi-location capabilities that will come out. We've got some additional kind of bin scanning, pick and pack stuff that's going to be coming out this year. We'll get into some of the kind of higher level audit capabilities as well, I think, towards the end of this year. So we've got the roadmap, and actually we're going to be publishing it soon on our website. We're going to actually get a publicly available roadmap so that customers and prospects can see what's coming up. But I'm optimistic that not too distant future, we'll actually be able to quite dramatically accelerate what we can do. And that's something we're working through now. We're pretty far ahead, but probably a bit too soon to celebrate it being done. Because as you said, it's a journey, but we're pretty excited about the future. And because we're benefit being a newer technology, it's everything's API first, right? For us, we think that there'll be a future where the robots, the AI agents will be coming in, buying and using Katana. So we're really making sure that we're ready for that future.
And let's talk inventory planning or demand planning for a second here, because this is the one area where most businesses, particularly when they're young, they're startups in the e-com space or in the digital space, they really struggle to do any form of realistic demand planning, particularly in the first 12 to 18 to 24 months when there's not a lot of data to go off of. It feels, because you're in a multi-tenant SaaS platform, you would have access to a tremendous amount of learning data that would form the basis for a very good demand, at least demand planning light. It's probably not going to ever compete with a NetSuite or like a big heavy-duty ERP-based demand planning platform. But the moment you get past one channel, any of the plugins for Shopify start to fall apart, because the reality is not all of those orders are flowing through Shopify. And so trying to do demand planning across 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 channels starts to become a nightmare. And so whilst you're tracking the inventory, you're not necessarily doing any inventory forecasting or demand forecasting. And so sure, there's Inventory Planner out there. There's an app that can plug into Shopify or into Brightpearl or things like that. But these are all kind of point solutions that don't necessarily sit within the nexus in the hub of where inventory is being controlled. And you need it to sit there because you need it to understand inventory movements, not only based on channel, but also based on inventory location and where that inventory needs to be shipped to be able to be shipped from. And so it feels like becoming an inventory orchestration platform, not just an inventory management platform, it feels like it would fall under your remit, or it could fall under your remit. Is that something that's important to the business?
I think it is, and I think you kind of increasingly. So we do offer demand forecasting and planning capability, and it is a light version. Right? It's not to replace some of the big custom solutions out there. It's not intended to. We have partners as well. Stocktrim is one of ours that do this better than we do, and so you can integrate to them. As I say, it's a light solution, but does what you're talking about, right? It allows you to bring in the demand from those different channels, forecast, use some history, that kind of stuff, and so you can get an idea. I think most importantly, what it does is it gets the business owner, the manager, whoever it is, to be proactive and not reactive, like you said, right? That's the big thing that often, particularly small, even big businesses sometimes, but they find themselves in a reactive mode, right? Firefighting. Oh crap, I got these orders. What do I do? I don't have the product for it. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's one of actually with the tariffs and all the other stuff going on, what we've seen is people have been, most industries, not all, have been shrinking their on-hand inventory.
Yes.
And because they want to manage closely, because they don't want to be left overstocked. But equally, that puts them into a risk of being understocked unless they demand plan. But we actually saw food and beverage, specialty food and beverage, at the beginning of the year, they doubled their inventory as a segment coming into maybe March, it was, I think. And so we were looking at, hey guys, you've got potentially a perishable product, definitely a shelf life. And so what they had forecast was that they had kind of massive demand coming in through the industry in April. And there were some tariffs and some other things, some other cost changes coming in place. So they bought up in March. But they knew that because they could see the demand coming. And so they were able to then take advantage of that opportunity in a way that I think lots of others wouldn't have been able to. If you're managing on spreadsheets, you should never see that kind of those histories and those patterns and those trends coming in. And so for me, it was just a really cool thing actually to see someone reacting so specifically to the market, not like the big picture, there's going to be tariffs, so it costs Michael up, let's buy more stuff. Because sure, that means you've got to have a lot of cash, you've got to be willing to invest in the inventory. This was more of a real time, hey, we see stuff happening. People like us. Let's go buy more things to sell to them. And they could see that in the platform. And then, as you say, they can do, that's the benefit, I think, for us is we give people the demand and the supply side so you can match them. And that's one of the things, obviously, the key to avoiding the overstock, understock situation is being able to match the demand and supply up. And I think if you do it in one place, in platform, in real time, you're going to be much more accurate.
Couldn't agree more. Listen, this has been a fabulous conversation. As I said, didn't have any experience with Katana before. Sounds like you guys are the cutting edge of the whole inventory planning model, the inventory management model, and trying to do some things that maybe the market hasn't seen before and maybe didn't even know, maybe even the market didn't know it needed. So I'm always wanting to put those types of new generation or next generation platforms on a pedestal wherever I can and get the word out on their behalf as best I can. Fabulous conversation. Now, I'll drop a link to your LinkedIn profile as well as the Katana website into the show notes. But other than that, if anybody wants to reach out and have a conversation with you about all things inventory management and planning, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is great. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn. You should be able to find me pretty easily. Just search by name.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely contact us on our website. If you're interested in Katana, just hit the demo button and the team will take good care of you. But if you want to reach out to me personally, you can do that. You can also email me if you want. It's just ben.hussey@katanamlp.com. And if anyone has any questions about anything today, I'm happy to take them. Happy to help whoever I can.
Love it. Love it. Amazing. As we come down to the end of our time together, now's my chance to flip the script, hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. Mr. Ben Hussey from Katana Cloud Inventory. What is your question for me today?
What scares you the most about the e-commerce industry in terms of change over the next 12 months?
Nothing really scares me. I've been in this industry for 25 years and I've learned that there's ups, there's downs, there's sideways and everything else. But I think that I focus so heavily on the B2B side of the industry, the manufacturers and the distributors out there and the wholesalers in the space, that my biggest concern is that unlike the B2C and D2C world, which is so far ahead of the game from a digital commerce perspective, and they're already starting to worry about agentic commerce and everything else, B2Bs in large part are still legacy businesses run in legacy ways. And depending on the category and vertical, upwards of 60% of these businesses don't even do e-commerce in any meaningful way at all today. The reality is that it's such a greenfields opportunity for me as a business that feels great for me. But the flip side of that is that many of these businesses can't take advantage of the new channel opportunities like Punch Out, like EDI, et cetera. They can't take advantage of going out and courting new tiers of business because they're just not digitally enabled as a back office. And so they are so used to having a one-to-one business model. Okay, I've got an account manager who's assigned a portfolio of customers and they manage those customers, right? Or we've got hunters that go out and knock on new doors and try to acquire new customers physically. Or maybe they email people, maybe they pick up a phone, but oftentimes it's literally pounding the pavement and going on call cycles and that sort of thing. And so the bigger concern that I have for the B2B side of the industry writ large is that they are so far already behind the digital commerce curve that this whole AI enablement of the entire industry is also passing them by. And so if they don't have a digitalized catalog in a meaningful way, if they don't have a meaningful PIM system, if they don't have a meaningful order and inventory management, if they don't have some of these automations within the business and they just have historically thrown bodies at it, and most of them, 95% of them will have an ERP of some variety in the business, but oftentimes those ERPs are 20 years old, they're green screen kind of technology, and there is this growing divergence between the B2Bs that are cutting edge and the B2Bs that aren't. And that growing divergence means that particularly new players, new market entrants who aren't starting with anything legacy and don't have any tech debt or anything like that, they start at such a massive advantage because they've got digital DNA. They don't need to graft on digital DNA. They are digital native businesses. Whereas a lot of these 25, 50, 75, 100-year-old manufacturers and distributors out there, they're trying to graft on digital DNA into their business as a secondary consideration. And I'm seeing that's a really hard thing for a lot of these businesses to do, particularly because they're second and third generation family-owned businesses.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest concern, and that's why I'm trying to get the word out. That's why I'm trying to put out content. That's why I'm trying to educate. That's why I'm just trying to sound the alarm for the major manufacturers and distributors out there who don't have a digital first mindset, that the market is going to get increasingly challenging for them if they don't make a move. And because these programs of work, they're not projects, they're programs of work over an extended period of time that if you don't get started now, it's going to be real hard for you to get started later as the market continues to march ahead. So those are the conversations I'm having right now, and those are the most painful ones.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we focus on the kind of easy to apply things, because if you're not digitally native, it can be scary and tough. We do still get a couple of people who are obviously cloud-based, and you would say, "Oh, don't trust the cloud."
Yeah. Hang on. Really? Listen, it's been a fabulous conversation. I so appreciate your time, and thank you for spending the afternoon with me, having this great chat, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.